Yeah, my name is Jeremy Hong, and this is HSA eligible hardware hacking, IoT devices you can buy with your benefits. And so, yep, here's the overview of today's presentation. It's pretty simple. Yep, who am I? Originally from Ohio, so actually this area, and Columbus originally, and moved to Florida last year. So I picked a hell of a week to come up here and do this talk when it's really cold. Professionally, I do hardware reverse engineering and RF stuff. So like currently I work at a company called Cromulence down in Melbourne, Florida. And they run the Hack-A-Sack competition every year with the Air Force, Space Force, and NASA. Yeah, so check that out. And I still do engineering consulting work through my own company, Untitled Electronics. That's kind of like just my personal way of doing professional work for all sorts of interesting clients. And then of course, sometimes getting data sheets or samples for parts that are interesting. The cool thing in my career thus far, I have kind of played both sides of the field on hardware security. So in my last job, I actually did anti-tamper systems engineering, along with a lot of actual design work. And that got less fun with the chip shortage, and decided to go back into reverse engineering. And also, I got really tired of Ohio because of the cold. That winter in was it February 2021 just absolutely killed me. I got stuck in the snow and everything, and I was like, I'm done with this. Lived here for too long. But yep, I've been tinkering with electronics since 2010. I'm a collector of fine test equipment and audio synthesizers. And I'm a licensed FCC amateur extra class operator. It's the reason why DC 937 meets at the Dara Clubhouse, is because I kind of lobbied for that. And yeah, please follow my dog on Instagram. Our mascot for Hong's Electronics. His name is Gomdori. He's a Pomsky, which his name means in Korean, little bear boy. So yep, here's also just had to put a cool shot of my lab here, the breakdown here. Yep, I have a whole rack of test equipment that I do a lot of RF work with, and then some really nice high-end soldering irons that I got really spoiled with in my last job, and I decided to buy those for myself as well because, man, they're really nice. Okay, so to preface some of this talk, let's go over some definitions in legal. So I'm not a lawyer, but fun fact about hardware reverse engineering in general, it's actually protected under the Semiconductor Chip Protection Act of 1984. Not going to read all this, the legal verbiage, but most of the precedents that this, or what it's interpreted as, is that, you know, what chips are used, how chips are built, and what they are made of, and how chips work. And as long as it's for educational purposes, which in this case it is, you're usually in the clear. And yep, and now, so because there's probably going to be some non-US citizens watching this, here's some definitions on HSAs and FSAs. Again, in the US, it's just a way of like either setting aside a designated amount of money to put for your healthcare costs, and they're only tax-free withdrawals if you use them for medical expenses, pretty much. So whether that be your co-pays, co-insurance, prescription drugs, or as the title of this talk, or very interesting IoT devices, as it turns out. It's amazing how if you look at the current list of eligible products, it's like so vast, and because of this complexity, that's why like all these dedicated stores online exist. And of course, well, I think even CVS, if you go to like CVS, Walgreens, or Target, they even have like separate parts of their website where they break down all the separate HSA and FSA items so that you don't have to deal with like, oh, is this, you know, add like stuff from your normal order to your, you know, your health products order. You don't have to deal with all the trying to justify to the IRS why you spent your HSA money on this, so you don't have to disclose any of that even. And yeah, so the backstory to this. So again, moved to Florida in July of 2021, but yeah, so it's September of 2021. Where we at? Like, so like 2 months in, had just, you know, setting up the rest of my hardware lab, thinking about safety items, right? Because safety first. in a hardware lab. So fire extinguisher, PPE, first aid kit. Okay, so let's try to find this first aid kit, right? So by this point, every job I've had has had an HSA account, and I've rolled over those funds. So amassed a pretty penny at that point to kind of buy just maybe like a $30 first aid kit or whatever. Oh yeah, and also here's some resources to get started in hardware reverse engineering and hacking. It's fortunately a great time to be doing this kind of work and getting started. It's amazing when I first either started doing this kind of work and also doing talks that most of these books didn't exist, and so now there's actually real good books out there that kind of have standardized and document the process. But yeah, here we go. So here I am just on this HSA store website that was kind of recommended from the HSA card website that I use, and so I'm like, okay, cool, and just kind of looking at the rest of the website, right? I didn't take of the specific instance where didn't take a screenshot of the specific instance of when I discovered this particular product, but it went something like this, where I looked at featured products or something, or it was surprisingly eligible products, right? And all of a sudden I stumbled upon this, and I was like, wait a second, that's Wi-Fi enabled? And I was like, add to cart. So yeah, that was how that started, because it's right, whenever I see something that gives me an excuse to hardware hack, I mean, I'm all in on it. So it was the sweet deal was, of course, oh wow, I can use my HSA for this. So yep, so that's target number one, is the male fertility tester. And yeah, so the brand, there's all sorts of memes and things you could probably make out of this, but yeah, it's the Yo Home Sperm Test 2.0 with Wi-Fi connectivity. It's yeah. So yeah, there's an Android iPhone app. There's even a PC app for this. Yeah, so I don't want to, there's a quote from the website that's on here that's pretty interesting. But this is basically how it works. It's like a microscope, right? And this is not my video, this is their video. By the way, full disclosure. Yeah. Full disclosure. So, so yeah, so get this device, and I don't even turn it on at this point, right? I'm very much if anyone watches or has heard of the YouTube channel EEV blog, it's don't turn it on, take it apart, so that I follow that here with just immediately trying to figure out, oh, where are the screws? This one, fortunately, was very easy. It's just you pop the cover off, there's two Phillips screws, and it's oh, there's hardware. And yep, in this photo, just a basic breakdown of the key parts in this. So what was it? ICA or ICA ARM processor that's in there. Those are apparently very common in IP cameras, as it turns out, as I'll talk about later. And more importantly, this flash chip that I'm oh, there's memory on there. And then this Realtek Wi-Fi chip that I'm okay, cool. And so, yep, so we get around to memory extraction, which fortunately on this one was pretty simple, except for the fact that, so again, I'm still unpacking stuff from my move at this point. So I find my bus pirate, and then, okay, it says it's reading flash, and then it just hangs. I'm okay, what's up with that? And then, yeah, the cool thing at this point, and again, one of the reasons why I'm really glad I'm doing this presentation is because I live tweeted a lot of this stuff at the time, and with how unknown the future of Twitter is, I'm glad that at least now there's going to be a video online of me talking about this instead of a Twitter thread. But at this point, I was huh. This is at 1:55 in the morning. I'm huh, for some reason that's not working. Maybe it's just because I'm running in a VM, because there's typically problems with USB support on VMs that I've seen that's bizarre. But as it turns out, it's just that the bus pirate is not as well supported anymore. And then of course, as someone pointed out to me, it tends to overheat when it's reading memory, what seems like a very small amount of memory, but for it's just not built for that purpose. So, so I pulled this thing out, which is the Exipter with Shikra, if I'm pronouncing that right. And that's a FT2232H based device. I actually had learned about this like a while ago, like probably with Ohio InfoSec Forum from a hardware hacking talk, and that actually came in really handy, that having this, because this just like worked within like a few seconds. It's like super fast. And yep, so in this picture you kind of see the Shikra, and then there's the chip on the little board there that I just kind of pulled out of storage that like happened to have a SOIC pad for the pins to break out nicely, and then I have a little USB power supply to power it up. But yep, that ran fine, and then immediately just kind of threw this into Ghidra to see what was on it, and then found some important strings like, oh, what's the baud rate? So, okay, cool. So now that I at least have firmware, I re-solder this. And so found the UART pins, which were fortunately nicely labeled. Love it when they do that. So yeah, it's just ground TXRX. And then another nice thing about the Shikra is that it also, since it's this FTDI chip that supports all these protocols, UART's one of them. So it was a nice case where I just changed to UART and then plug that in, and then got a terminal. And let's see, where was I? Yep, there you go. And then I think originally tried logging in. Yeah, there's the password. There's like a password on this apparently. And then, so yep, I have the firmware at this point. Now you are access to our root. Nope. And so I did some of the more simple things where it's just like, just set the boot args and U-boot. Or actually, that's what this picture is me interrupting U-boot. So I think it gives you 5 seconds to press any key to interrupt U-boot. And so that's what I did to just change that. But then this actually put me into a nobody shell when I did that. And so I was like, oh, can't read the password in shadow files, okay. And then again, like for me, this is kind of like where my hard cutoff is for expertise typically, is like once I get into like Linux and other software things, I kind of fall off a cliff of like, oh, really like this, I mean, I guess I kind of know how to do this, and just go a bunch of Googling. But one thing I did notice at the time was, oh, okay, the partition, or what was it? Yeah, the files point to this etc path in a Jefferson 2 partition, and that turned out to be a very crucial detail later. And so, yep, here's binwalk, and me highlighting that partition. And yep, so I ended up doing that, got the actual password in shadow files, and then followed actually this tutorial that I link on the bottom here that I just Googled. And then I had this moment where like, okay, friends and coworkers recommend John the Ripper, and I was like, you just put it in there, it just instantly works. I'm like, wait, did it actually give me a password? And I was like, oh, it's a blank password. And then this is the strange thing. So here we go, I'm in, right? Just, I'm in. So. But then here's the interesting part. So I did like a double, triple take of this. I actually sent this binary to my coworkers and stuff to look at this, but I attempted to log in as root with this blank password, but that didn't work for some odd reason. Again, second guessing myself here because this is my area of expertise. Didn't think I was using the tool correctly. What eventually worked was just like copy and pasting the hash itself that was like in the shadow file, and that logged me in for some reason. But then when I actually changed the password, with the actual hash that was like consistent with a blank password, that worked afterward. And so I was like, okay, what's going on there? But yes, yeah, so conclusions from this target. Yeah, so in-circuit reading actually didn't work when I first tried, so I didn't even bother taking pictures of that. But typically I use like a what they call a SOIC clip for this particular package to just read it without desoldering it. But there's cases where that won't work if the power supplies aren't separate, because it'll end up powering everything else on the board, and which is bad when you're trying to read content when it's like reading and writing stuff back and forth between the microcontroller, microprocessor, and memory. And yeah, the bus pirate just epically failed on me at this point. Like this was like the first real time that it actually just fell flat on its face. Like I forget, like if you try to use the bus pirate now and install all the libraries, like all that stuff is dated from like 2015, 2016 time frame, and it's like barely even supported. And now flash ROM still works, which is what you still use with the bus pirate, but it works best with FT2232H based devices. So whether that be the literal FTDI branded breakout boards that they sell, the eval boards, or the Shikra, or the Joe Fitzpatrick's Tigard is another nice variant of this chipset. And some security concerns, I guess, just from my perspective, is like, okay, one, this is actually not connected to the internet, which is kind of nice. But one thing that, as someone else independently was working on this later, like, so funnily enough, 16 days later, another Jeremy, different spelling, looked into this device, and he more or less looked through the web server route that I was running instead of actually doing hardware RE like I do. That's just what I'm more comfortable doing. And I had linked to his Twitter thread here, but yeah, he also running Hashcat found the password is blank, so that was kind of nice to see that being confirmed. But as he pointed out also, yeah, it's like maybe the app is something to investigate. That's completely outside my skill set, but I mean, right, it'd be interesting to see what data is actually being collected and stored and being sent where, right? But here's some funny tweet replies I got at the time. It's like, could you use this as an entropy source, like the image that it generates? Like, like how like Cloudflare uses like a wall of lava lamps? I mean, this has enough randomness with the movement of whatever you put under the microscope, yeah, so. And yeah, it's like, imagine having an output to a 40-inch TV as a screensaver, like, okay. And then it's like, one of them like recommended like adding like Snapchat filters. Can you do that to like, the little sperms? I don't know. It's like, it's like, what? I can't make this up. So moving on to target number 2. So to add a disclaimer to preface this talk further, so I kind of like, right, this was like just like the one device I hacked last year, and then like I didn't expect to like really do anything else after that. And then of course this conference came around, and I was like, oh, maybe I should just submit like a proposal. And then so when it actually got accepted, I was like, oh shit, I have to actually do another device. So I bought this. Like apparently baby monitors are also HSA eligible devices, as it turns out. And I mean, basically, right, it's like a very application-specific webcam or security camera. So this is specifically the Owlet Cam 2, which is a fairly popular baby monitor because it actually has this cool little Bluetooth sock that you can put on the baby to measure vitals. Apparently, a coworker of mine that had this actually saved their baby's life, apparently. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to do a talk on this, but hopefully I don't find anything dramatic on it. But as it turns out, so what actually made me want to look more into this device was the first gen of this device had some fairly lackluster security write-ups and just like anecdotes like on Reddit here and there. Like, oh no, our baby monitor was just hacked, and we know it because if the red light comes on, that means someone's watching or someone's observing, right? And we didn't even have the app open, but as it turns out, that actually might be more or less just on the end user using very weak passwords. So just food for thought there. But yeah, I kind of wish I had the first gen device, which was not on the website. But this is what it looks like. You get both the camera and the sock. And so this product Teardown, because we're like at 3 weeks before this talk, I'm like frantically trying to take this apart. I'm like, oh, where are the screws on this? Like, there's like nothing. And so I'm like thinking, is it just hammer time, Dremel, Hulk smash? And this is a how to basic GIF, I think, GIF/GIF. Yeah. Because right, that's like, oh no, I can just use the FCC ID to maybe give me some insight on this. And anyways, I wanted to look at what the internals were. So, there's this awesome tool, FCC ID.io. So whenever you look at any device that has that complies with the FCC, which is almost every like consumer device, if you look that ID up, like you can actually find like in some cases very high res product teardowns. This one was just low res enough to the point where you couldn't read the chips, so that was like, oh, okay. So, but this actually gave me some insight on how to open it up because it's like, oh, so that black plastic part is what you take out first. Okay, so I tried that, and of course, let me go over. And so with FCC ID.io, this is a great hardware reverse engineering tool for reconnaissance on targets and stuff. So like, for example, did a training course at my work and just basically wanted to find all these like different Wi-Fi routers from a surplus store that I went to, and so like literally I'm like looking at the FCC IDs of these routers in this surplus store, like trying to find ones with the easy SOIC flash that you could easily desolder or put like a clip on, and yeah, it was very helpful because it's like, oh, there it is, like it's just in one of these like product teardowns that they do for this compliance testing, and so yep, here we go. It's just like, oh, yep, it is that plastic cover that you take out first. And I was like, wow, this is nice. You can use the magnetic base to hold the screws instead of losing them, right? So just like easily amused, like just, but yeah, under the microscope, yeah, looking at the parts on this, it's, okay, so it's like another IP camera kind of SoC that's running on here, ARM Cortex-A7, another SPY flash, and it's like another Wi-Fi chip that I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Don't know what to do with that. And then so in this one, I'm going to kind of go over how I actually desolder one of these chips. So like, you know, I have basically, right, it doesn't have to be this specific soldering station. This just happens to be the $1,500 one that I got really spoiled on at my last job. So, but as long as you use like Chip Quick, which you could just use with a single soldering iron, and you just quickly alternate between both sides of the part, you can desolder it. But yeah, here you go. Video is 8 times speed. So yeah, here with my nice soldering tweezers, that's how you take it off. And then since I'm gonna plan on putting this back on, I clean that up, and then, yep. And then here's me cleaning up the actual SPY flash with some solder wick. And then with some isopropyl and a lint-free swab. And then the next part, which is the more of a focus on this, about the state of hardware reverse engineering tools is, so traditionally, actually even in my full-time job, I'm more used to using some higher-end programming or programmer and readback devices like the Zeltec tool is like one that it comes to mind, or there's like Dataman, there's Elnec, there's all these like big brands that they sell this box that's like $2,000. Each adapter for it's like $500 or more for like some BGA parts and stuff, and it's kind of gets annoying when you're taking apart a device from like the same family. It's like you expect it to be the same exact memory device, like eMMC, and expect it to be exactly the same physical dimensions as another device in the family. But as it turns out, it just so happens to be slightly different. So now you have to buy another Zeltec adapter that's $500, and fortunately, nowadays, just by chance, I had this Xgeku T56, which is this, basically it's a derivative of the TL8066-2 EEPROM programmer, but it has upgraded hardware plus an FPGA to support over 33,000 types of memory chips and microcontrollers. And the cool thing is that like, so I think like the base bundle for like $200, you get like the SOIC adapters, TSOP adapters, like the really old style PLCC adapters for older memory devices, and then each BGA adapter, fortunately, is not $500 and more like $50 to $100 instead. So it's really nice. And of course, the funny thing, if anyone's familiar with the Zeltec software, is that there's a lot of it seemed like that there's a lot of interesting similarities between the software and the other versus the actual genuine products. So yep, run binwalk on this as usual, just like, oh, okay, let's look at that. Find easily UART on here. It's TRG, which stands for TX RX ground. Thank you. And yep, U-boot was easy to interrupt also on this. Just hit Control-C just on startup. In this case, they only gave you what, like, if you didn't do it on startup, like just holding Control-C, it would immediately boot. So here, try to get a root shell this way, of course. That and I'm like, okay, cool. At least it didn't throw me into a nobody shell this time, right? It's actually root. But unfortunately, this is Squash FS, so I can't change the password. So yeah, I tried attempting to crack the hash for this, but even tried multiple dictionaries with it, not to no avail. So it seems like it's either like based off of the device serial number or something more complex. So I didn't go forward with that. And also, this was like literally like, was it 3 days before I flew out here? And then that didn't give me enough time to actually fully do the full hardware RE treatment on this, but I did tear this down, which is kind of interesting. So in this case, right, I had to figure out like, okay, so this obviously you have to cut open, which the FCC ID on this confirmed that. It was on the little nub there that fits basically into this charging base. And yep, like there's like what your heartbeat sensor and then a couple of other, what was a pulse oximeter sensor that's on there. And it's all like in this enclosure with the really nasty potting material that's in there. Just like crumbles apart and gets all over your hands. So I got a little annoyed by that. And then I just referenced the FCC ID document in this case because I had the better picture of this. But there is like like it looks like a JTAG or SWD adapter or a connector on there on the PCB. So, and I know that this runs off Bluetooth, so it's probably some ARM-based Bluetooth device. Didn't look any further into it because I literally ran out of time on this. And yeah, so conclusions from this device. It's really nice when low-cost memory reading tools like this exist now, like the XGECU, because the one thing that at least with this device, was that Flash ROM did not support this particular flash on this board. So like I was kind of SOL on that. So I was like, oh, well, at least I have this other tool that supports like another few orders of magnitude more chips than Flash ROM. So now this one, of course, some security concerns. This one's actually connected to the internet, but from at least my hardware perspective, it appears like the root password appears to be strong, and user must use a strong password for access, and like the app is probably what they're kind of relying on for security here. So general conclusions on both these devices. One, you never know where you're going to find interesting hardware hacking targets. I think more research should investigate these health devices with more emphasis on more of these that can be purchased easily with basically your benefits, because they probably get purchased quite a bit. And I think the smartphone and computer apps might be more interesting from a security perspective, like what data is being collected and stuff. And yep, the one thing, I think really the bus part is obsolete at this point. Just get an FT2232H based board. Please do that if anyone's using a bus part still, and accidentally updates the library for support. So future work. So there's still plenty of devices that are HSA eligible. So there's on the other side, right? There's female fertility trackers and stuff, the actual hardware devices. So. And again, going to reiterate that point that probably the apps for these are of very much interest to security researchers, especially in this current political climate, so to speak, without being very specific. Because privacy is very important. And so, any questions? Yes. I'm an EE by trade.
Okay. I guess that route, that's something I'm interested in kind of getting at.
Okay.
That route. When you started, would it help to start playing like more of the languages like C?
Yeah, definitely. Having some knowledge of C definitely helps, especially right when. Again, like my software experience and kind of expertise is is not great compared to like my hardware expertise. So generally, right where software comes into play for me is just like either checking kind of like the integrity of what I pulled off a board, or just general like code flow of like, oh, looks like it's kind of triggering this port on this device, right? Like anything that kind of like interacts with the hardware directly is like kind of where my level of expertise ends. Like once it interacts with like more higher levels of abstraction and code and stuff is kind of where that ends. So like sometimes I know a little bit enough to be dangerous, but it's like, oh, yep, pass it off to the software REs that actually know how to use IDA and Gijra more than I can. Yes, and there's another question back there. Yes.
So could these devices actually have this error like 10 different
Yeah, so I'm assuming that actually that Bluetooth sock, it looked like it actually had that standard pinout. Of course, couldn't get to it because I had to prepare for this trip out here because I left this to the last minute. Oof. And I do actually have a J-Link, so I actually might do that after this. And if you hopefully if Twitter's still up, maybe you might see a few live tweets. I mean, it's on that, but but yeah, it definitely appears to be that way. And I forget, like I think some of those because right, there's a lot of ARM-based devices on these, so there were some parts of the board that looked like they were JTAG headers, but I was like, oh. I mean, for me, like any priority with attacking a lot of these devices is usually getting memory first, so that I at least have an image of before I bricked it, so that if I do brick it, then you just reflash the memory. So, yep. I know. Yeah. Yes.
I assume that your standard contract specifies that the tests are all destructive tests.
Yeah. Yeah. That's correct. I mean, so. I haven't done any like actual hardware security consulting like on that regard, but that's basically what they would require would be that, yeah, you better buy me like 3 or 4 of these devices because one of them is going to get pulverized basically, right? So, yep. Any more questions? Any further questions? Nope. 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 Okay. Yep. Thank you. Yeah.